In the previous video, we described the Bernoulli trial, which corresponds to a single coin toss. We studied the probability distribution and statistics for this process. In this video, we now study the probability distribution and statistics corresponding to the outcomes of a series of tosses, as summarized to the right. The probability distribution we obtain is called the binomial distribution. Consider tossing a coin n times. In this cartoon, we will illustrate tosses 1, 2, and 3 concretely. The outcomes, whether we obtain heads for these tosses, are individually XA, XB, and XC. When tossing a coin 3 times in a row, we can obtain a variety of outcomes. Each outcome is specified by determining whether the first toss lands heads or tails, whether the second toss lands heads or tails, and whether the third toss lands heads or tails. If the probability of landing heads on any individual coin toss is p equals 1/2, then the probabilities for these 8 illustrated outcomes correspond to slices of a pie chart divided into equal areas. However, if p takes a value differing from 1/2, then the pie becomes biased and the areas of the slices uneven. Some configurations become more likely than others. Our purpose is to write down the probability for obtaining a particular total number of heads, x equals xa plus xb plus xc and so on, from n tosses, given that each individual coin toss is a Bernoulli trial with probability p. What is the probability for a particular sequence? Assuming that individual coin tosses do not influence each other, we say that they are statistically independent. Thus, we say that the probability distribution for getting the sequence string XA, XB, XC, and so on factorizes into a product of individual probability distributions P sub A of X sub A alone times P sub B of X sub B alone times P sub C of X sub C alone, and so on. If, for example, we are interested in the sequence tails, heads, heads, which we also call 0, 1, 1, we write down the fraction of time that the first toss lands tails. Out of that portion of the pie chart, what is the fraction of time that the second toss lands heads? And out of this portion of the pie chart, what is the fraction of time that the third toss lands heads? The chance that the first toss lands tails is 1 minus p. The chance that the second toss lands heads is p. And the chance that the third toss lands heads is also p. More generally, the probability for getting the outcome sequence XA, XB, and so on is a product of two terms. P is taken to the number of heads x, and 1 minus p is taken to the number of tails. The number of tails is the total number of tosses n minus the number of outcomes that are heads x. How many ways are there to obtain the same total number of heads? In addition to the particular sequence tails, heads, heads that we have so far considered, there are 2 additional ways in this pie chart to obtain 2 heads and 1 tails out of 3 tosses overall. We get different outcomes by rearranging the sequences of the outcomes of the individual tosses. There are 3 ways to get 2 heads and 1 tails. More generally, there are a combinatoric factor, n factorial over n minus x factorial many ways, to get x heads out of n coin tosses, as the viewer can review using the video tutorial on combinations. The probability of getting 2 heads out of 3 coin tosses is a product of a combinatoric factor that specifies the number of slices of the pie chart that satisfy this condition. Here that's 3 slices, multiplied against the size of a slice, which is the same for each of these 3 slices. The probability of getting x heads out of n coin tosses is a product of a combinatoric factor, n factorial over n minus x factorial, and a size factor, p to the x times 1 minus p quantity to the n minus x power. This probability distribution is called the binomial distribution. Now that we have described the pie chart to the left, we will present a couple examples of its associated statistics. What is the average total number of heads obtained from many experiments, each of which consists of n coin tosses? While we could directly substitute the probability distribution from above into this weighted sum, we instead recognize that x is a sum over individual outcomes xa plus xb plus xc and so on. So we will calculate the average of the sum, that is x, by writing down the sum of the averages of the outcomes of the individual tosses. The tosses have the same probability distribution and associated statistics, so this sum adds up n copies of the same expectation value for the number of heads on an individual toss. In the last video, we derived that this expectation value is p. The average total number of heads is the number of tosses, n, times the probability, p, of success on any individual toss. What is the variance in the total number of heads? While again we could directly substitute the probability distribution into this weighted sum for the square of the deviation of x from its average value, we will instead remember that the individual coin tosses are statistically independent. This means that the variance of the sum equals the sum of the variances. The variance associated with the total number of heads equals the sum of the variances associated with the numbers of heads on individual tosses. Because the tosses are described by the same probability distribution and associated statistics, this corresponds to n copies of the same variance for the number of heads from an individual coin toss. In the last video, we derived that the variance for a Bernoulli trial is p times 1 minus p. Thus, the variance associated with the binomial distribution is n times p times 1 minus p. In this slide deck, we presented the Bernoulli trial, and particularly in this video, we presented the related binomial distribution. Despite or perhaps by virtue of their simplicity, the basic processes, probability distributions, and statistics summarized on this slide serve as workhorses for introductory courses in probability. These distributions are often used as the starting points from which special case distributions are derived.